Since September, politicians and the media have become increasingly concerned about the state of our economy. Predictions of no economic growth in 2009 have moved from being the worst case scenario to the reality facing New Zealand. As the truth of the recession and higher unemployment hits home, politicians and households have become alarmed. Although rightly concerned about our economic prospects, New Zealanders are wrong to see our woes as largely being driven by the global financial crisis. The challenges that New Zealand will face due to the international crisis will no doubt be great, but we mustn't fool ourselves. New Zealand has been in a recession, getting poorer since the first quarter of 2008. We were in a recession before the fallout from the global financial crisis arrived on our shores. We were in a bad economic situation, and the financial crisis has simply made that situation worse. Today, I want to set out the economic troubles facing New Zealand and then set out a way to redesign our tax and welfare system to achieve a high-growth, low-tax welfare state. First, let's consider the deteriorating economic situation after 9 years of Labour control. In the private sector, our current account deficit has ballooned to its largest since the last major recession in 1975. This large increase in the current account deficit, now equal to 8.5% of GDP, occurred despite the most advantageous terms of trade since the early 1980s. As our current account deficit grew larger, we told ourselves that a significant drop in the dollar would help eliminate it. Unfortunately for us, the drop in the dollar has been accompanied by a significant reduction in commodity prices. What does this mean? It means that unless we make major changes to our policy settings to increase our international competitiveness, then the current account deficit is here to stay, and this deficit will require ongoing financing. Ongoing. But such financing is increasingly scarce because of the global credit crunch, and on top of this, recent trends in Europe towards more trade protectionism will threaten New Zealand's exports. This will only worsen the situation. On the household level, the situation does not look pretty either. During Labour's rule, household income increased, but the increase was largely driven by New Zealanders working harder, not smarter. Our labour productivity growth today is lower than it has been since the early 80s. Low productivity growth is causing low wage growth, and we have now become one of the lowest growth countries in the world. There is only one way to increase wages: increase productivity. This economic fact must be understood before we can design policies to boost average income. Despite this reality, we have unions, like the Engineering, Printing and Manufacturing Union, publicly announcing that it will continue seeking real wage increases. Any increase that workers receive beyond productivity increases will merely exacerbate unemployment. While we know what creates wage growth, the Labour government blinded itself to the importance of productivity. During the Clark and Cullen era, average productivity growth was 0.7%. Under what Clark describes as the failed policies of the past, the reform period, it was 3 times that. Despite setting a goal of making it back into the top half of the OECD, Clark and Cullen dreamed up and tested for 9 years the failed policies of the present. This has caused us to slip further down the OECD ladder. But while household incomes have not risen significantly, household debt certainly has. Despite slow wage growth, we have continued to live beyond our means. To finance our wants, we have turned to debt. Household debt has soared to over 150% of disposable income. With credit cheap, we mortgaged our houses to buy consumer products. With the prospect of increased unemployment, many families will struggle to pay the interest on their debts. That's just the economic situation in the private sector. Let us now examine the public sector to see what kind of fiscal situation we face there. When Labour was elected in 1999, the New Zealand economy was recovering strongly after the Asian financial crisis. Growth had been high and was expected to continue to be high. The solid economic framework New Zealand had developed during the reforms of the 80s and early 90s ensured that we would grow. We had a simple taxation system where the Inland Revenue Department was a tax department, not the administrator of complex welfare schemes. We had defeated inflation through tighter monetary policy that focused on inflation targeting. Privatisation had created efficient businesses targeted at meeting consumer demand, in direct contrast to the arrogant monopolies that preceded them. There's a gap in my speech. Hold on for just 1 second. I'm just going to go back a bit. Labour started in 1999 with one of the most simple tax systems in the world, with a broad tax base. It destroyed the simplicity by introducing complex working for families tax credits, reintroducing failed subsidy programs like the Research and Development tax credits, and making the taxation department responsible for transfer programs like KiwiSaver. These complications have increased compliance costs and enriched tax lawyers, while doing little more than distorting incentives to work, while doing, I've lost my place again, I'm sorry. While doing little more than distorting incentives to work and save. We now have a roller coaster set of fictional marginal tax rates, which ensures people worry more now about how much of their benefit they will lose, rather than how they can better their career. Oh, excuse me a minute, I had a quick break. Back again. Labour increased the costs to hire and employ workers and told us these policies were employee benefits. They were benefits for people in jobs, they were but hurdles for those out of work. They will now act as a major barrier to re-employment for those who lose their jobs. Labour engaged in widespread regulation of network industries like telecommunications, which impaired the incentives to invest in key infrastructure. It burned millions of dollars of value in Auckland Airport to score a cheap political point and destroyed the savings of many mum and dad investors when it sunk Telecom's share price. Labour embarked on a massive expansion in the breadth and depth of government services. Whenever spending increases, we must ask ourselves whether the cost is worth the benefits it provides. Perversely, Labour measured the benefits by how much taxpayer money it was spending. It turned the government waste into a positive. Despite warnings from Treasury that much of the spending was low value, the government continued to take money off taxpayers only to filter it back to them through. I'm even boring myself. The past 9 years have shown what happens when the government lacks direction. Policies have been implemented with no clear goals. Some policies even work in the opposite direction of the stated goals. For example, if you believe the rhetoric surrounding working family scheme, it was introduced because the government was concerned about high effective marginal tax rates. To solve this, it introduced a new benefit scheme for those at work. This merely created high effective marginal tax rates for those in low skilled employment, impairing the incentive to get ahead. I'm going to skip ahead a bit now. The problems that we face are daunting, but they also provide us with opportunities. We know that monopoly control ensures that service suppliers do not respond. There is only one way to solve this problem. Only by restoring responsibility to individuals will we be able to tame the increasing cost of government services. Only by restoring choice to individuals will they become more independent rather than dependent. Only by creating a low-tax welfare state will we be able to achieve economic prosperity. We can do it if we have the guts to do what's right. Ah.